These are things that only like advanced exchanges, offer, and Drift is one of the largest DeFi protocols that I know about that's offering this like full suite of tools. If you're lending in Drift, you are not assuming the risk of perpetual trading the way that you would otherwise if there was not this like priority.
Good drift, everyone, and welcome to Under the Hood. So this is Under the Hood with BigZ Pubkey today, one of the Drift co-founders. And in this episode, we're going to talk a little bit about risk at Drift. So a bit about Under the Hood. So Under the Hood is the Drift show where we lift the lid on all things Drift to give you a bit more of an understanding of what's happening under the hood. So welcome, Z.
Thanks, James. Thanks for having me.
Good to have you, mate. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to flick ahead. Basically, what we wanted to talk about today was all things drift all things risk at Drift and all things drift as well, with BigZ, one of our co-founders. Now, to give you a bit of a sense of what's coming, we're going to talk about risk. We're going to go over some of BigZ's tweets, which I thought could be quite interesting to unpack. So, what does he mean by this? How does this actually work? And then finally, we're going to do a bit of an AMA with Z at the end. So as we go through the episode, please drop your questions and comments in the chat, wherever you're watching the live stream. And we'll make room to answer some of those with Z toward the end. All right, so BigZ, he's one of our co-founders, as I alluded to, and I also like to refer to him as our resident bond holder. So Z, did you want to do a bit of an introduction?
Sure. I guess today the bondholders kind of won, which is funny. But yeah, that's just a joke, I guess. Yeah, so I'm Big Z. I've been working on Drift for years now, and I have primarily focused on smart contract and risk engine design, among lots of other things, lots of other little things. But that's where I spend all my waking hours in the metaverse. Uh, I guess we've seen crypto catastrophes over the years, and one of the goals of Drift is to be like bulletproof in that sense, to survive Armageddon, crypto Armageddon again and again keeps happening. So, how do we bolster a DeFi protocol, non-reversible transactions and all this, to avoid those crazy days?
So resilience is a key theme for you. How do we make it? How do we build Drift resiliently? So I might actually just skip ahead here. So yeah, little intro on me. So I'm James at Drift, and I do all things sort of on the growth side, whereas Z sits on the more technical side of the team. So we try to divide and conquer here. But this is a nice little segue. So Z, you were just talking about making Drift resilient and risk. And I actually posted this tweet a couple of days ago about you on this exact thing, which is what inspired this episode, actually. So one of the things that I mentioned here in response to one of your tweets was that you seem to always be thinking about risk. And a lot of that focus of yours, being one of the co-founders, is reflected in Drift's design. So I thought it could be interesting for us to maybe just unpack this tweet of yours, which is what inspired that response of mine. And just get a bit more of a sense from you what you actually mean here. So what does this actually mean? How does it work? But in particular, the last part of this tweet. So you sort of mention here that protocols should mitigate sort of tail risks, so long tail market risks. And you talk a bit about liquidations and how there's sort of these insurance caps and there's these protections in place to mitigate that sort of downside event. So maybe you could just explain to us, what this means.
Sure. I guess to give like a little bit of context, Drift is also obsessed with being capital efficient to the extent that you can have a single account where you can trade perps and do lending and borrowing. You can trade multiple perps. The P&L in one position can offset the loss in another and prevent you from getting liquidated. These are things that only like advanced exchanges offer, and Drift is one of the largest DeFi protocols that I know about that's offering this like full suite of tools. And yeah, that's kind of like where this stuff comes in. So if you have an account that can do so many different things and you have cross margin and cross collateral, how can you actually prevent like spillover from one market into another? And it's actually possible if we keep track of perp P&L in this way. So that's kind of like the first part of the tweet. Like every market, we're tracking the P&L in that market, and P&L is being transferred between users through an intermit escrow account. And yeah, doing so means like there's no risk of double counting or having one market that somebody has massive amounts of P&L in that's just, not real, manipulated or something, and that affecting the solvency of another market. So that's kind of like the whole motivation on that design choice. And basically by doing P&L this way, the protocol isn't like autopiloting into contagion or insolvency. And the reason that you can have this insolvency is because when one guy's long and another guy's short, if the price moves so fast, the short is underwater. Like if the price five X's, um, the short's underwater, and that long needs to find money from either an insurance fund or something else. And so that's like the next step I was mentioning. Like we're basically like rate limiting the amount of insurance that gets settled, and there's basically like a step-by-step process, like what happens when this step runs out of money and when this step runs out of money on how to resolve that.
So,
So that's a long-winded way of going about it, but I wanted to say like the context is because Drift is offering this crazy capital efficiency, we need like this other system to prevent like this blow up risk.
and it sounds like sort of to visually imagine that what you're saying is each of those perp markets, like the Sol perp market, the BTC perp market, and then say the Dupe token perp market, they're all separate dominoes, and you sort of space the dominoes far enough apart that if one falls, it doesn't knock another, and then sort of cascade across the entire exchange. Is that a fair
Yeah,
summary?
yeah, that's perfect. I'll steal that. In fact, they're so far apart you can't even see the next domino when you're in.
The space between the dominoes is expanding at an increasing rate. So, okay, well, that's, I guess that raises the question then about the insurance fund, because you mentioned that there's sort of these steps in the process to mitigate the risk within each market. In the event that, say, a short goes extremely underwater, like you just explained. So maybe you could just explain a little bit about, so what happens. So the first step would be like liquidation, and then sort of, yeah, the insurance fund part. What is the insurance fund?
So the insurance fund is basically a way for the protocol or for other users even to stake funds, basically betting that after liquidation, users won't be bankrupt. And bankrupt being that they have a negative balance. Because the insurance fund is basically saying if users have a negative balance, I'm gonna pay off those negative balances so that the winners can claim all their money. Um, is that a good high level?
It's a good high level, and I guess the next step is, well, where does the insurance fund come from? And I guess to this user's question here, in response to your post, how big is it?
Oh yeah. I see that you liked it in preparing for that screenshot.
I
That's
did.
funny. I didn't even see that one. I guess the insurance fund you can see on the website. You can see the total balance. I can look at it right now, and then people can also check the chain, but I'm just going quickly. So the insurance fund balance is 26.6 million USDC. And that's just the USDC insurance fund. There's also other spot insurance funds, which are basically collecting portions of the borrow rate, similar to how Aave works, and then storing that in case in the borrow lend, those markets need insurance. But the
Right.
USDC insurance fund is important because it's also utilized for the perp, the perp markets. And each perp market actually can't fully claim from that insurance. Every perp market has limits to how much you can claim. So markets like the major three, Sol, ETH, and BTC could have much higher insurance limits than say like Doge or WIF or other meme coins. And you can see all that. I think it's in the market details for every market. So um, before you trade a crazy market and you wonder, is this going to be like another another story the next day? Like you can always look to see how much insurance or how much size you really want to put on.
Okay, so you mentioned that there are a number of different sort of insurance markets or insurance funds. That we kind of show them in the UI as IF vaults, insurance fund vaults. So I'm just wondering, just to make it really simple, so each of the dominoes that we talked about earlier represents a different perp market. So we've got the Sol perp market, the BTC perp market, and then say the Doge perp market. So you mentioned that there's this USDC insurance fund and there's this proportional sort of ability to claim from that insurance fund for each of the markets. And I'm sure there's some parameters that determine how much that proportionality is. My question to you is, does each of those perp markets, those dominoes, have their own separate insurance fund, or are they all sort of tapping into that USDC insurance fund in the event of sort of one of those shorts underwater positions that we just talked about?
Yeah, so they are tapping into that single USDC insurance fund, but there is a maximum lifetime limit that they're allowed to pull from that is set by the set on the market and can be updated by the risk council for drift. But then after that, um, if the AMM, like the protocol market maker, has extra money in the fee pool, that'll also get utilized prior to any socialized losses. So you can think of each market can tap into this main insurance fund, which is getting this hourly revenue for stakers. And then if that limit dries up, it can hit the protocol AMM, pull money from there, and then only as a last resort for bankruptcies resolution, like it'll actually socialize the loss using the funding rate in the market to just distribute proportional based on size. So this is like it's a long chain, and these things don't really get hit when you set low leverage limits and a ton of other things, OI limits. But it's important to have because when protocols basically go into delisting or changing things on the fly as a response to events, it can be quite tricky for power users who want clarity on like what do I want to have, like what are the steps that are going to happen in the event of these scenarios. Giving power users that clarity is pretty important. And it prevents like kind of arbitrary or strange decision making later when all the rules are kind of laid out beforehand. So
No changing Oracle prices by the sounds of it.
uh, I guess, yeah.
All right, fantastic. So I guess that we are going a bit in the weeds there, but it's good to know because there's a lot of depth to this topic, and yeah, I think joining the team sort of a bit over 6 months ago now, it's really opened my eyes to how complex drift actually is, and what's actually happening on the risk side. So yeah, props to you, Z, for driving that initiative and that focus and attention at Drift. All right. So you also mentioned something before about sort of borrow lend. So how Drift is capital efficient. So you have your collateral in the borrow lend at the same time as you're using it to trade perp markets, for example. And so I guess the question that I have is, well, what's the difference between the perp markets and the borrow lend? Like, what is the interplay between the insurance funds and the borrow lend, and what's happening there? Yeah,
Yeah.
there's lots of questions about that at the moment.
This is my favorite one to answer because every time we answer it, people are very happy.
Amazing.
Yeah, so if you're lending versus perp trading, like the protocol knows or is taking the opinion that lending lending has priority, like your collateral has priority to perp P&L in the event of bankruptcies. So what that means is when liquidators are looking at somebody's account, they are actually not allowed to um, use collateral that would otherwise be used to pay off a borrow before before the per P&L. Sorry, I'm gonna try that again. So like when the liquidator has to decide like what order am I gonna liquidate stuff in your account? You have a ton of stuff going on. You got perp, you got borrows, you know. Like those borrows need to be closed before your perp P&L can be closed. Not necessarily like your perp positions. Your perp positions can be lowered to reduce your risk, but the actual losses that you're suffering in a particular market cannot take priority versus borrows. And what that means is that if you're lending in drift, you are not assuming the risk of perpetual trading the way that you would otherwise if there was not this like priority. We call it like a tranche of risk, like and Lulo has this concept too of tranches between their protected deposit and their like more risky one for higher yield. So we have like, yeah, there's priority on bankruptcies for deposits versus per P&L. And this is like something that makes a lot of lending people happy, knowing that they're not going to be getting, perp risk added just because they're lending within Drift.
All right. So it sounds like, if I can play it back, that the borrow lend and depositors on Drift are like the first class citizens when it comes to those liquidation events. So it means that um, they take priority over sort of the perp, the perp traders and so forth in the event of a liquidation. So I guess that sort of answers some questions that were raised recently. So Chris was posting on Twitter about which this tweet here, I believe, on screen you were responding to, was talking about how there's a bit of a market perception that maybe because Drift is cross collateral, the Drift's borrow lend, has sort of different or a higher risk profile than sort of other venues that don't also have that. And so, if I understand correctly, what you're saying is that's actually not the case. It doesn't have extra sort of risk parameters for the sort of risk exposures, sorry, for a depositor in the borrow lend, because of the way in which liquidations and those events are sort of handled in terms of the order of events. So borrowers get repaid first and then everything after. Is that a fair summary?
Yeah, yeah, that tweet is perfect. I should have just read that tweet. But
Well, see,
we're just riffing, so
horrific,
all good.
horrific. All right, awesome, awesome. I've actually got a little bit of a curveball one here. So obviously, Drift gets compared to other trading venues quite a bit, and you actually posted this one the other day, and I thought, oh, well, why don't we just include this one and get you to explain a little bit of what's going on here? So, if you wouldn't mind, what's going on
This
here?
this was so funny because I think like overnight people were spamming it and they found like a bug basically that it was just really funny. It was a win for the other side, just like getting some funny points.
Okay.
But yeah, we fixed it and it's working perfectly fine now. So if anybody wants to start spamming again and try to find who's winning at every waking moment, please. Yeah, I posted this because honestly, a lot of people have asked for this, like regardless of whether they're Drift fans or Hyperliquid fans. They just kind of want to know, like, well, how good is the liquidity on either venue? Like, no BS. What's it like right now? And yeah, this just kind of crawls through both order books, steps through, calculates the average buy and sell price. And then what's interesting is like the Oracle prices, which are just like the numbers at the top. We're gonna clean this up later. But the numbers at the top, those little green numbers, there also there's different like reference Oracle prices. Um, this is important. Like if you're doing funding arb or something, like you want to know, like, should I like recently, yeah, people are like doing a sell on Hyperliquid and a buy on Drift to collect funding. And if the Oracle prices are different, then I think you need to also keep that in mind. So yeah, other people are doing much better, uh, trader terminal research on this than me, but this is just a good way for everybody to just kind of like take a peek, like who's doing better at every moment. And I've noticed just like the volatility's picked up a lot. Like the spreads are widening everywhere, but on Drift, I think it's doing okay. But yeah, it's gotten even more volatile since then, since 10 hours ago or whenever you picked this up. So
Yep. Yeah. No, I definitely noticed. Yeah, a lot of red on my CoinGecko app this morning when I woke up. So I'm not surprised to hear the spreads are widening. I'm sure we're all feeling it at the moment, except for you, Mr. Bondholder, who's well and truly protected in these down periods.
of course.
All right. Well, I guess the other question that I have on this, just before we jump ahead, is does this also consider sort of our new Swift liquidity? So conscious that that's not resting liquidity, meaning not sitting on an order book somewhere. So is this simulation also, I guess, getting a sense of what quotes might be coming through from market makers through Swift, or is that sort of separate again?
So yeah, that's great because um, there's an effort right now to include those indicative quotes. Um, and it would be really cool to see, you know, if you turn them on or if you turn them off, like what the drift side looks like again. Um, so
So the answer is
excited to add that. So the answer is no, it does
not
not
yet.
include that. So there
Yeah.
is more
So it'll get
invisible
better.
liquidity. Yeah, it should be better. It should be better.
Great, amazing. All right, so yeah, let's not derail and talk about Swift. We'll do that on a separate one. But that's good to know. Good to know that that's
You
coming.
already had Chris go on about Swift for
Yeah,
an
but
hour, right?
there's plenty more to go on about. There's lots of depth there. All right, so we talked about this one already. I'll skip ahead. Okay, I did not understand this at all. Do you think this is appropriate for this conversation to pick apart, or do you think we should skip it?
We can quickly talk about it because it does go into the intuitive uh, thing that I tweeted about,
All right, let's
like
do
just
it.
making the risk stuff more intuitive. So this is the feedback that we got, like having this continuous discount um, on the max leverage for positions is kind of hard to estimate. So this is basically what that's simulating. It's saying like if you are, I can't read the numbers at the bottom, but like let's say 10 million, your max leverage is cut in half. So you can't go, you know, 40x long on Bitcoin with $300 million. Like it's just dangerous for both you and the protocol, right? So this is kind of just showcasing that. But the feedback that we got was that if they are kind of just like uh, based on position limits rather than like a continuous curve, like it would be a lot simpler. So if people know, like if I'm over 100 Bitcoin, like my max leverage goes down. Then when I'm over 200 Bitcoin, my max leverage goes down again. Like those, like a table, those discrete jumps is going to be a lot more intuitive for power users than, this continuous math function. So less math and more tables is the is the TLDR on how this is going to work in the future.
Awesome. And I'm guessing this was in response to sort of some of the big recent sort of events that we've seen in the space with traders forcefully liquidating themselves and socializing losses. Is that kind of in the right direction? Is that
Yeah.
what this is in
Yeah,
response to?
we
Yeah.
get questions all the time like how is Drift protecting itself and me from that. So, yeah,
Yeah.
that was kind of as a response to that.
Yeah. So maybe that is a worthwhile question. So I think next up we've got time for a bit of a Q&A, an AMA with Z. So I guess we're pretty lucky at the moment. Z has blessed us with a bit of his time to do a bit of an AMA. So what we might do is if everyone who's watching live just wants to drop any questions for Z, anything at all, chuck them in the chat, and yeah, I'll see if I can figure out how to bring them up screen, and we'll get Z to answer some of your questions. So while you're thinking of questions and you want to drop them in the chat, I might just pick Z's brain with one more here. So I guess what you just said there, Z, was we've been asked a lot of questions about people having reasonable questions about drift after what they've seen happening recently in terms of sort of, I guess, profitable trading strategies on other venues. So I guess, like, from your perspective, can you just explain to us like whether or not drift does have that same risk exposure, or like what the key differences are, which mean that if we don't, why we don't have that same risk exposure on drift?
Yeah, I would say there's like a multi-layered, it's kind of multi-layered reason why we don't have that same risk exposure. And I think the previous tweet talked about that, where individual account leverage limits are set by market, and then there is a overall open interest limit. So when two users are kind of when somebody's creating two accounts to self-trade, they're only up to allowed to go up to a certain number, to the point where it might not be dangerous, like sufficiently dangerous for the protocol. The same time, like, yeah, I honestly think that open interest limit and those and just like smarter leverage limits are kind of the main reason that this like self-trade attack isn't really hitting. The other thing is, like, if it's a market where you can manipulate the oracle, and you're trying to settle collateral to withdraw temporarily dislocations in price, like temporary dislocations in price. Uh, if the price is moving ridiculously fast, like let's say over like 20% versus 5 minute or something, like you're not going to be able to actually get that collateral to withdraw immediately. Just like little things like that where we track the moving average prices and such. You will get the worst of the moving average price and the current price if there's significant divergence too for your max leverage. So basically, when prices go berserk, we're not giving people maximum leverage through drift. So yeah, it's just multifaceted, I guess, is um, the reason that those same attacks can't really work. Really, I think open interest limit kind of blocks a lot of shenanigans. Um, Most of those crazy perp attacks through DeFi history have been around like massive trades in super low liquid markets. It's kind of like again and again is like the story we keep seeing with that.
Yeah.
And
So
they're usually food or fruit based coins is like the hilarious thing. So I don't know how
noticing
many.
a
Yeah, I'm
noticing a bit of
noticing
a pattern.
a pattern.
All right, stay away from the food and or fruit based tokens. Got it. And I think the other question that I would have here is, like, I think to me it seems like one of the key differences between drift and other venues here is, like, we don't have this liquidity pool on the other side providing liquidity, which is kind of like taking on those losses for those underwater positions. Is that also part of the reason why I guess that concern is less of a concern on drift versus other venues?
Yeah, I think it's really like as a as a last resort, like a big vault was taking over um, those positions and basically forced to hold a massive position going the other way. Whereas on drift, like that person doesn't wouldn't just like automatically fall into like that position wouldn't just fall into a vault. It could still stay in the account and the account would just be bankrupt, and then the winning side wouldn't be able to pull from like a massive pool of money um in that manipulation attack. So not like moving positions into pools with lots of money is also a good way to prevent losing a lot of money. So it's like, yeah, there's a distributed network of liquidators, and if nobody takes it over, then the winning traders are kind of on the hook in that market. Like they just can't collect profit.
Got it. Got it. All right. So it sounds like all of your thinking about risk at drift is, I guess that resiliency is shining at the moment, based on sort of things that we've seen on other venues lately. So that's good. Good news. Great news for us. All right. I guess just a reminder to everyone, this is a Q&A open forum at the moment with BigZ Drift co-founder. So if you have any questions for Z, anything at all, bit of an AMA, just drop them in the chat, and I'll endeavor to pick those up, and we'll get Z to answer them live here. So while we wait for more questions to come through, Z, you also tweeted just before we jumped on this that you're cooking some stuff on how to better show risk at Drift, how to better explain risk. So maybe I thought you could give us a bit of a teaser and let us know what you meant by that.
Yeah, so we have well, it's kind of twofold. Like we're doing a revamp of the documentation. W.Sol is really leading that in a great way. And then we also have a risk dashboard for Drift, which is public, but not touted at the moment, given it's still in under active development. But you can check it out at risk.drift.trade. Um, and some things that are like some things that are really cool that we were talking about having on there is just having like this concept of proof of reserves that exchanges have. So yeah, just showcasing like the proof of reserves and the solvency um in like a real-time way is something. It's kind of a missed opportunity for a lot of DeFi protocols, honestly, to like just showcase that and show like, okay, if it's a centralized venue, you're not necessarily sure what their liabilities are. Um, we also have things like like scenario analysis. So if prices move a certain way, like what can we expect? Like, is the risk engine going to handle it? Is the insurance fund going to be okay? So that's also a page that we got on there, and it's also just like ways to monitor like the largest accounts, the accounts that are the most levered, who's got the biggest position on, just tracking and monitoring whales activity is both fun and important. Um, when like just monitoring protocols. So sometimes you see these tweet threads like, here's this whale doing this crazy thing, right? So we're trying to build a little page where you can watch the whale watching.
In real
Um,
time. That's pretty cool.
yeah, yeah.
I also like to hear there's updates coming to the docs. I think that's really cool. Because yeah, we've had a bit of feedback on questions recently, some more, I guess, risk related questions. And so it's great to hear that that we've got W.Sol working on making the docs even more comprehensive, and more expansive as we've continued to grow and add more things to Drift over time. So very bullish on that. Yep, just quick reminder to everyone: any questions, drop them in the chat, and we'll ask Z. So, all right, Z, you've sort of touched on many different things, updates to dashboards, new ways of mitigating risk across Drift, new ways of monitoring and tracking risk events. What do you think we could do a better job of explaining to people as it relates to risk at Drift? What do you think we could do better?
That's a good one. I think I think so much of Drift is just open source software to the point where it's like everything that is being done is like the standard of transparency is quite high. I think maybe that could become popular again at some point. I feel like it's become less popular in crypto for some reason, for everything to be transparent and open source. Or maybe I'm just being
Grumpy old
difficult,
man,
but yeah, I was like back in my
back in my
crypto,
day, shouting
yeah,
at
yeah,
clouds.
yeah, screaming. I think like showcasing that more. Honestly, I bet a lot of people don't know or appreciate that. Uh, just like every just like anybody can come in and check things out or dig deeper if they want to. And always like we've had people who want to build cool things, and you kind of can get people to build awesome things if you do that. You have like the vaults going on right now, which is just like everybody's who's running a vault or depositing in vaults is learning a little bit more about, oh, I didn't know you could do this or that on Drift. So there's a lot of cool things if you look under the hood. And I hope we can do a better job showcasing that.
And it's exactly the intention of this show. So I'm glad to hear that we've come full circle there, with the purpose of the show, which is to show people what's happening under the hood. Because Drift is, there's definitely a lot of things to learn, and there's a lot going on. All right, you mentioned something else there, Z. I wanted to just pull on. You said the risk engine, right? What is the risk engine? What do you mean when you say that? Can you just help put it in Eli 5 TLDR terms?
Yeah, it's probably more like the margin engine. So margin is just this, like how much buying power am I going to give you for the money you put into the system? And based on all the things that you're trying to do, you're trying to bet on this, bet on that. Like, how much more buying power should I give you? Like, you want exposure, you want this amount of dollar exposure. That's kind of what I mean by risk engine. Margin engine, risk engine is kind of interchangeable, where the margin engine just needs to be smart about how much uh, how much margin or buying power it's giving you.
And when you say margin and buying power, do you mean as in like how much you're able to borrow against your collateral? How much you can leverage against your collateral with perps? What do you mean specifically?
Yeah, so in our worldview, everything's either an asset or a liability. So you deposit collateral, you deposit crypto coins. All crypto coins are assets. There is no such thing as a crypto coin liability, as far as I know.
Unless they're
Because you would
food related,
no,
right? Isn't
no,
that
you
what you
would
said
just
earlier?
delete it. You can burn it. You can just burn it. So the lowest the lowest value is zero. So we can never go under zero. So that's an asset. And
Got it.
then a liability is something that the smart contract is basically insisting upon you. And as hostage or as an escrow, it's taking your money and saying, well, you owe this on top, like from that. So that's kind of how borrow lends work. And then if you don't want to withdraw money and instead you want to put on positions, that's perp, and that's considered a liability. And then the P&L from perps, positive or negative. Positive is a asset, negative is a liability. So that, I guess does that answer? I forgot what you asked. What is the margin engine? I don't know where to start. What is
That's
an
okay.
engine?
Yeah, exactly. What is an engine? Yeah, no, I think the question was more about what do you mean when you say margin? Margin. What do we mean? And I think you answered. You gave us a little bit of an accounting lesson there, how of drift accounting, assets and liabilities, which is very helpful. And then the smart contract insisting upon the depositor or the borrower, and the user of drift. All right, let me just quickly check the chat and see if anything's come through. Um, really quickly. So we have a question around fuel, and that is TBD, to be determined. So to that user Burlico, that will really depend on the total amount of fuel that's earned by using Drift between now and June. It's a milestone-based program, so you can learn more about that in the docs, and that should give you a sense of roughly where the milestones are looking to land. So that's probably not a Z question, at least for now. It's probably more of a me question. We've got some comments. Drift's bulletproof. That's nice. Thank you, Sir Khans. Squid says it's Z. Big Z pub key. Thank you, Squid.
Thanks,
Drift.
Squid.
Thanks, Squid. We love Squid. And then Sir Khan says Big Z, and Ashen says Drift Bab. I'm not sure what Drift Bab means. Maybe it's something to do with us babbling and yapping about Drift. or maybe that's an acronym that I'm yet to learn because I'm getting too old and I'm not keeping up with all the lingo. So, Ashen, if that is the case, I'd appreciate it if you'd privately DM me what BAB stands for and what that means. All right. It looks like we haven't got any other questions come through. So obviously you've done such a good job, Z, of answering all the questions proactively that you've used up all of people's questions. On the risk side, I'll ask another one. Is there anything else that you think would be worth sharing with people who are listening? We've got around 600 people listening live at the moment. Anything that you might want people to take away from this as it pertains to risk and drift more broadly?
I guess I really think DeFi benefits by everybody um, learning and growing together. Like DeFi from 2 years ago looks like DeFi today versus 2 years ago is like a completely different beast, and there's just not the same level of super crazy shenanigans that was happening 2 years ago, and I think a lot of that comes from the lessons learned and people building on top of each other. I probably won't just like name a bunch of protocols, but I've just watched kind of the evolution where this person iterates this way, and then you see a new project kind of incorporate that, and just that like trail is like I think really important. And I'm starting to feel like we're getting like some nice, like we're in a good steady state of risk controls, and I think the next step really is how can we offer users a better experience while maintaining the same safety measures. And that's like, the next challenge, I would say. So part of that I was saying is like, how do we simplify things for the power users, like using step functions instead of um, like just math, like continuous discounts. I think that's been one of them. And just making the whole thing more intuitive. Like we've tried a lot on the health page, I believe, to do that breakdown of assets and liabilities. But at the same time, like sometimes you're seeing a number that you're not anticipating, and with all these layered rules, it's kind of tricky to know what's happening in every scenario. So finding that balance of simplicity and safety is something that we're working towards. So I would just want everybody to appreciate that it's definitely a balance, but the best UX, in my opinion, is uh, all the money is safeu. So
Yeah, and I mean, it wouldn't be known, but we recently have brought on a new sort of product manager who's working really diligently to make yeah. I mean, I'm currently in Asia with him at the moment. We're doing an offsite with some of the team, and yeah, it's quite incredible what he's bringing in terms of trying to achieve what you've just mentioned, Z, which is making things a bit more intuitive and clearer to users across the board. So yeah, big things coming on the front end side to try and make drift simpler and more intuitive. Hopefully it hits the mark. And hopefully he's working closely with UZ on that from that risk perspective as well. Like how do we make those assets and liabilities and those obligations and the health of your account, how do we make all these things really clearer and more intuitive? Which I guess that probably raises a question for me. What is the IMF? Can you explain that to us in brief?
oh, that was the plot that you showed. So uh, it's like it's I think it stands for initial margin fraction or something. So it's like in case like initial margin ratio is like how much do you give somebody initially, and not to maintain a position, but just to put on a growing position. And then this fraction is basically a way to say, or factor maybe, it's just a way to say like as your position is bigger, how much can I shrink that initial margin ratio? So that's why you saw that plot with those lines going down. The bigger your position, the less, yeah, exactly, the less leverage you have. And leverage is kind of the reciprocal. I see how I threw that in there of margin ratio. So yeah, if you have like, I think 20% margin is equivalent to 5x leverage, because basically it's discounted to 20%, so that's 5x.
So I think if I could summarize as simply as I can, it's sort of dynamically adjusting based upon the portfolio. It's not something that's sort of fixed and set. It's something that adjusts based on the changing value of all the positions in your account. Is that a fair summary?
It's very close. I guess the one thing I would say is that it's not updating with the prices. Otherwise, that would be a nightmare, right? Like, we're talking about intuitive here. Like, it's tied to actually the base amount of the asset. So if Bitcoin goes from 40 to 80K, like you're not going to see uh, a change in that margin ratio per se.
Mm.
So it's calculatable on the base level. You know, if you have one Bitcoin is one Bitcoin, and it's the same rules on that one Bitcoin. Um, but we're trying to make it even more intuitive. We're taking it one step further, where you don't even have to worry about this unless you got 100 Bitcoin or 50 Bitcoin or whatever.
All
So
right.
if you're you know if you're a small bag, this um, shouldn't even affect you.
Okay, so I don't need to worry. Got it. Understood. Thank you kindly.
Yeah, that was my long way of saying, don't worry, James. Don't worry about it.
Oh, amazing. Thanks, mate. Appreciate it. Seifu, got it. Got it. All right, let me see if I can. I can. There we go. So I've just figured out how to show comments. So Goldhack says, market down, can devs do something? Well, Z, what are the devs doing right now?
We're we're doing a Q&A.
We're doing a Q&A. That's exactly right. Devs are shipping and they're making risk dashboards better and making understanding risk and drift more intuitive. So I think that's a worthwhile cause. Thanks for calling that out, Gold Hacks. All right, Z, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate you stepping us through that. We covered a lot of ground. We went a little bit deep at points, and then we came back up to the surface. And I think one of the key takeaways for me is this visual with these dominoes that are very far apart spaced. So far, in fact, that they can't see one another. So I think I've learned a thing or two here. Hopefully, those who've dialed in have also learned a thing or two. And yeah, where can people find you, Z, if they want to learn more and follow your tweets and ask lots of questions like I have today?
It's my name at BigZ pub key with a little underscore. So it's you gotta hit the shift key, get that underscore in there, and then you'll find me.
Amazing. All right. Thanks, Z. Really appreciate it. And thanks, everyone, for dialing in and joining Under the Hood. And we'll see you soon for the next one. Thanks, Z.
Thanks for hosting, James.
Cheers, guys.